Almudron is a leviathan introduced in Monster Hunter Rise. He's encountered late into the game, and as such is one of the tougher monsters there. We're going to be discussing him today because, compared to his contemporary leviathans, Almudron is an extremely unique and underappreciated monster that should be talked about more in my opinion. Everything from his moveset, design, armor, weapons. There's a lot to appreciate here, but also to discuss, because during the time of Rise, Almudron was one of the more hated monsters in the game. Design-wise, Almudron is a black, brown and red long-bodied wyvern with a whiskered face and a paintbrush-like tail. His body is arched and curled, and he has twin spines that run from his head across his body. His default stance has his tail curled around his side, turning him into a U-shape. Almudron can be encountered in the shrine ruins, flooded forest and sandy plains, locales that tend to have muddy water fit for him to thrive in. Many of his attacks involve bites and claw strikes, such as when he raises his body and slams one down twice in a row, or swipes it to drive close opponents away. However, the majority of his attacks make use of his paintbrush-like tail, which is not only covered in mud but can manipulate it. He can swirl around in the ground and send waves heading out in all directions. After creating distance, he can smack it down before swiping it, creating a solid mud platform followed by a flowing wave. He can lob more waves while stationary and twist his body to slam his tail down on you, and his length results in the attack having a lot of reach. Almudron will also sometimes send his tail forward as if to punch his opponent, swing it with a spin attack like Mizetsune, or swipe it in front of him to produce more mud waves. Almudron will sometimes submerge himself in the ground, with only the front third of his body and tail being visible. This lets him continue to attack with his tail, smacking it down or swishing it around, and of course, sending more mud at you. The mud can drive you back and inflict water blight, but more often than not will actively remain on the ground as puddles, restricting your movement if you're caught in them. They do expire after some time, but remain long enough to be something that you should be aware of. While submerged like this, Almudron can also dive in completely, rush towards you underground, and leap out to another position. When he decides to leave the water, he can sometimes create exploding mud puddles surrounding him. Things get more interesting when he becomes enraged. Golden liquid begins to emerge from his mouth and tail. This liquid is acidic and is mixed in with the mud he sends out, causing certain puddles to appear golden, but also drain your health while in contact, even if you're down in a supposed invincible state. This makes the mud puddles far more hazardous, especially when more of his attacks spread them around, such as this new one where he backflips while creating a row of acidic puddles. While enraged, if he slams his claw down twice, he'll follow up with a wide tail swing that is very capable of catching you off guard. Things get even more dangerous when Almudron does his swirl attack again because while enraged, he'll end it by creating a giant mud ball on his tail. This causes his tail attacks to pack even more of a punch, although in this state, his mud throwing capabilities are limited. Eventually, he'll destroy the ball with a massive explosion. You can prevent it by attacking the ball itself, which will destroy it after some damage and cause a knockdown. An interesting but uncommon attack Almudron has involves him digging to the other side of an arena and creating a mud fortress of sorts, while sending out massive mud globs to prevent you from reaching him. You can dash between the pillars or over them to reach him. If you don't, Almudron will start creating mud explosions from beneath you. It's an extremely robust moveset for a monster that's not a flagship, nor has its own theme, or any particular story significance. It involves a decent variety of short, medium and long range attacks, with a lot of area denial mixed in. To defeat Almudron, you have to stay aware of his mud puddles while avoiding that giant tail and any potential waves he can produce. Not just that, but his hit zones are not great. Most damage is inflicted either on his head or tail, both of which are raised and are sources of danger. Almudron's tail, like Duramboros's in the previous episode, cannot be fully severed either, nor does it limit his abilities. Almudron is a HR7 monster in Rise, which places him next to monsters such as Diablos, Magnamalo, Gosharag and Rojang. In Sunbreak he is mostly identical, but gains one brand new attack where he creates mud explosions after a submerged tail slam. Sunbreak introduces a new subspecies for him, the Magma Almudron. This one lives exclusively in volcanic regions such as the lava caverns. He's ash coloured, with black and orange undertones, and he's noticeably smaller and more aggressive. The first big difference is that Magmadron replaces mud for a special type of magma. He sends it flowing at you just as Almudron would with mud, which inflicts you with fire blight. He no longer leaves static puddles lying around, but he can create solid magma rocks which explode after a short time. The other major difference is that Magmadron is much more physically aggressive. While Almudron spends a lot of time partially submerged, dashing away and sending mud waves at you, Magmadron is far more likely to attack you head on, only remaining in the ground for short periods of time. He has more exclusive physical attacks and combos, such as being able to rush towards you with a tail punch twice in a row, rush out of the ground with a quick punch, or slam his tail forward. His attacks tend to be faster, likely owing to a smaller size. He can flip out of the ground to create a massive explosion, even when his magma ball isn't active. Magmadron does have a noticeable weakness, however. His body heats up whenever he emerges from the ground. This softens his head, limbs and tail, which causes them to take much more damage. So while Magmadron is a more dangerous fight, you can take him out fast if you're just as aggressive. Almudron's gear is really cool. For some reason, it takes on a very mechanical look. The male armour resembles a robot with a dark steel-like appearance, giant pincers on the arms, and golden energy flowing throughout with a core centered on the chest. The female armour is similar, although the face is exposed, with the helmet resembling a hood with giant cat ears. The armour is said to be hardened by mud and also extremely resistant to it. Not just that, but they're apparently very popular among in-universe hunters. The Master Rank design has a still robotic but more unified appearance among genders. There's still golden energy core scattered throughout, but also a giant visor on the head. The arms have dual shields, and there's visible back spikes and tails that give the silhouette something of an X shape. This is naturally true of Magmadron as well, but his armour takes on an ash-white colour, with dull purple undertones. The energy cores and visor are more of a magma coloured orange. Almudron's armour is very much optimised for the switch axe, with rapid morph, evade window and power prolonger. Magmadron's set is a little less clear cut, with resentment, resuscitate and heroics. It's arguably centered around taking damage, and guard up implies it's supposed to be used for shielded weapons. Speaking of weapons, Almudrons are fantastically designed. They tend to also be mechanical, with a lot of curves and circles incorporated into the design. Take the Mud Twister dual swords, which are two ring blades with razor edges. They make the dual swords attacks look really crazy. Or the Doombringer hammer, which has a giant ring that you smash monsters with. It actually spins as you charge it up, which is really fun. The switch axe is iconic, with the blade being circular to resemble Almudron's tail, with the same golden energy as the armour flowing throughout. In sword mode, it sort of ends up resembling the Monado from Xenoblade. The Doombringer blade longsword is also curved, with a round core near the hilt and several ridges along the blade. The sheath is small and looks to be a charger or magnet that the sword sits on when unused. The Doombringer gunlance has a fairy shield with Almudron's red hairs covering it. The gunlance resembles a railgun, with another yellow core at the base. This is also true for the Doombringer light bowgun. Finally, the Hail of Mud bow is quite literally a compound bow, featuring dual pulley systems designed with large rings to enhance the power of the weapon. Almudron's weapons universally deal water element damage, while Magmadron's deal fire elements. They follow similar design motifs as the armour, where they're the same ashy colour with glowing magma energy flowing within. Almudron is said to be at the top of his food chain, and one of the strongest leviathans in the series. As such, he has very few competitors. Bishaten has been seen trying to take him down, but the battle does not go in his favour. Almudron's body is optimised for dealing with mud. It doesn't tend to get stuck in his scales, as they're layered naturally to repel them. His feet are webbed, which allows him to easily move through too. In some of my footage, you might have seen Almudron submerge in solid ground. You might think this was a bug or glitch or oversight, but in actuality it's an ability granted by his golden mud. It's naturally acidic and allows him to essentially soften up the ground so that he can swim inside. This allows him to perform these attacks even when he's nowhere near bodies of water. His claws are curved, and he's able to twist his body like a drill, which grants him an easier time digging. His tail is also designed to hold and store mud. I mentioned Almudron's shield having these red hairs. You can actually see these on his body. They're very small and are used to sense movement when he's underground. It's how he knows where to create mud explosions when fighting you, or how he knew exactly when Bishaten was about to break free from his muddy trap. Magma Almudron naturally has a different ecology. The reason he's so small is because the lava caverns and other volcanic areas naturally aren't as plentiful in food sources as forests or swamps. As a result, there's less for him to eat. But Magmadron is also smaller because he's constantly spending energy from creating a special fluid. It's essentially his own version of what Almudron has with the golden acidic liquid. Magmadron's protects him from the heat of the volcano and is also used to produce the magma-like liquid from his attacks. Yes, that's not actually real lava, but something similar that Magmadron can manipulate. His liquid is secreted from his tail and also helps him to burrow through solid rock. Another interesting difference between Almudron and Magmadron is that while both are territorial, the forest dweller isn't so aggressive. This is shown in his introduction cutscene where a Baldrome intrudes upon his territory in the Shrine Ruins. Almudron essentially scares him away, without actually attacking, and even in his fight spends a lot of time stationary while submerged in the ground. Magmadron on the other hand shows no mercy. In his introduction cutscene, he slaughters several Oroctos that are in his territory, and his fighting style is far more aggressive. Monsters originating in Rise tend to be based around different yokai. In Almudron's case, it's Dorotabo. This is a ghost of a rice farmer who spends his life toiling fields. After dying, however, his successors neglected his fields and left them to waste, angering and causing him to haunt them. At night, Dorotabo rises from the fields to harass the neglectful farmers until they either change their ways for the better or leave so that somebody better can take over the lands. Dorotabo is often depicted as a screaming figure covered in mud, emerging from the ground, with a single three-fingered hand reaching up. In many ways, you can see how Almudron was inspired by him, the way he's half submerged in the ground with only his tail out. When covered in mud, his tail even looks like it has 3 fingers, which is also reflected in his icon. Rise's scenario writer Hiroshi Yamashita also based Almudron's introduction scene around Dorotabo, where he's yelling at Bullfango, one of the most annoying and disrespectful monsters, to get off his field. It's also possible that Almudron was inspired by Onomatsu, a catfish yokai that writhes around in the mud and causes earthquakes. It does fit the bill, especially with Almudron's whiskers. According to director Yasunori Ichinose, they conceptualized Almudron as a weasel calligraphy master who used mud as his ink, which is shown in a lot of the concept art, where Almudron's face often looked far more weasel-like than it is now. His voice was designed to sound like a husky old man, according to sound designer Yutaka Omuta. The developers all around put a lot of thought into designing Almudron. He's not the only mud monster on the scene after all. Baroth and Giratodus are also in the game and make use of mud, so Almudron was deliberately differentiated by having an ability to both transform and control the mud more directly. The monster production team were cognizant of many monsters using their tails, and wanted Almudron to be more unique, but were also careful to not have too much happening at once. Almudron can create acidic mud piles, create a giant mud ball hammer, and even giant walls, but none of these things tend to happen at the same time. When I killed Almudron for this video, I noticed that when he was dead, mud was still flowing from his tail. This was apparently a deliberate move by the designers. When monsters die, parts of them that are glowing or active will stop. Monster model lead Hiroyuki Konta stated that when Almudron died, they made it so the golden acidic mud stopped flowing, but the natural mud, something not produced by Almudron, kept going. Magma Almudron was designed to attack the hunter head on. They wanted more of a mix of risk and reward, so they gave him a lot of new combos and attacks, while also making him weaker when emerging from lava. More dangerous to deal with, but more damage to be dealt. Yusuke Okuda, a monster modeler, wanted to ensure that Magmadron looked like he was emitting heat, but was careful to not make him too bright or dull amongst the lava of the caverns. Yutaka Omuta also adjusted his sounds to account for Magmadron being smaller in size. At the beginning of the video, I said that people did not like Almudron. There's a few reasons for why this was the case. First of all, Almudron is kind of big. This means that it can be hard to tell what is happening if your weapon requires you to get up close and personal, and especially if your camera isn't zoomed out, which is an option in Rise's settings. As I said earlier, only the tail and head take decent damage, but they're difficult to hit in the moment because they're always moving. Almudron tends to change around which side his tail will rest, so people end up hitting his claws accidentally, and not only do they take less damage, but in low rank actually repel green sharpness weapons, which is a huge problem. Thirdly, there's a fair amount of time wasting in his fights, with him constantly flying through the air. Yes, it looks cool, but in this clip I've taken he does it for a solid 40 seconds, and it does get a bit much. People also find his Mud Fortress attack to be a bit pointless. Finally, and this is what I really want to talk about, people found him too hard. The telegraphs aren't good enough or are too quick, his attacks reach too far, his tracking is too extreme. You can still find plenty of online discussions repeating this exact same thing. I can see where people are coming from, and personally, I think it boils down to Almudron being a very unconventional fight. We discussed his moveset in detail, and also how the developers designed him. Almudron is a boss who shares very few animations with other monsters. In fact, I'm fairly certain there's only one. That spinning attack with his tail is taken straight from Mizutsune, but nothing else. If you've seen my big review of Monster Hunter Wilds, you might recall how I had difficulty with New Udra because, being a giant octopus, nobody else fights like him, and it meant I had to learn many new telegraphs and how to get around new attacks. I think this was also true for Rise Tears and Almudron. Being a HR7 monster, his attacks are fairly strong and often complicated, and with an entire set of unique tells, people sort of had to approach him differently, especially since he has a lot going on with his mud puddles, acidic mud puddles, or the giant's ball. Perhaps this will be controversial, but I'm saying people dislike Almudron because they find him difficult. I've fought him at least 40 times over the years, and I have to say, I find him quite fun. He's definitely tricky in a way that can be annoying, but once I figured him out, it became a good time. Granted, I mostly use switch hackers against him. Shorter weapons definitely have a trickier time, but not a bad one in my opinion. You can see me using dual swords against the master rank version, with a basic storm soul set, and I'm not having a bad time because I know the fight. Almudron being difficult and different is probably what gets people. In that regard, I would compare him to Lunastra in Monster Hunter World, a challenging elder dragon who angered everyone. She's fast, strong, has tough hit zones, a lot of area denial, and is unexpectedly different to Teostra in ways that really throw people off. She's extremely difficult, but not in a way people find particularly satisfying to overcome. But I quite like that. It's rare to have monsters in the newer games that actually push you to play by their own rules, and alter your strategy. To give you an example, Hazard Risen Shikaru Magala is the hardest fight in Rise Sunbreak, but he's not asking me to do anything differently to what I normally do, just lock in slightly harder. But monsters like Plesioth or Black Gravios demand that you respect certain characteristics of theirs that are often really frustrating to deal with and often make it feel like they're not playing fair. But eventually, you learn to live with their abilities and get around them. They're still dangerous, but you know the trick to dealing with them. Almudron isn't quite on the level of those monsters, but he's fairly close in my eyes. In any case, I find it interesting how Magma Almudron is in many ways something of a reaction to the standard Almudron. Pretty much all the big complaints are fixed with him. Too big? Magmadron is smaller. Too much time wasting? Magmadron is more aggressive. Bad hit zones? Magmadron's heat up mechanic ensures his arms will be softer. The only problem is with that mechanic, people believed he was stealing Agnactor's thunder. We covered him in episode 2 of the series. If you recall, he too has a mechanic where body parts soften when he goes underground. People believe Magmadron had essentially stolen his slots. On top of that, Sunbreak was abundant with fire subspecies including Blood Orange Bishoten, Pyarachna Kadaki, and Flaming Espinas, so Magmadron felt a bit sameish to people. Either way, the changes made to Magmadron's fight makes him a lot more straightforward than the standard Almudron, with a lot of the more difficult traits toned down or removed, but with new attacks and combos added to compensate. And based on what I've seen online, people do like him for that. I suppose what this means is that people like difficult monsters only when the sources of difficulty are things they can easily work around. Almudron ended up at 161st place of the Hunter's Choice poll, right after Rusted Kushala Deora, but before Tsiyaku. Magmadron ended up tying with Argyle Thunder Serpent Nawa at 210th place, along with several others. As I said in the previous chapter, I think Almudron is a good monster. I picked him to discuss in this series all the way back in 2024 because of his unconventional moveset and the way people talk about him online. I do think he's underappreciated in that regard. His design rules with the twin spines, mean-looking face, curled body and paintbrush tail. His gear is awesome, and I do think that as a fight, he does put up a decent challenge in a way a lot of modern monsters sort of don't. If they turned up the dial just a little bit harder, he could be 4 ultimate levels of tricky. Magma Almudron's discourse irritates me. It does feel like people get too hung up on the surface level Agnactor comparisons because really, the fights are different. Agnactor uses the standard Leviathan attacks, likes to aggressively tunnel underground, and fires lasers while half submerged, while Magmadron likes to toss lava at you. In fact, Agnactor is probably more similar to the standard Almudron in that regard. Either way, I do think Magmadron is fun too. Extremely aggressive, and I think one of the only monsters to actively throw lava at you. In terms of the future, I don't know if Almudron would return for Wilds or an expansion, but either way, I really want to see him back in a future game. Particularly from a hardware perspective, I think they can do a lot more with the mud than what Rise was doing, both visually and mechanically. His gear needs to come back too and hopefully get expanded. I would love to see a Charged Blade or Hunting Horn in the mix. I hope you enjoyed this video, and honestly, I would love to hear everyone's thoughts on Almudron. He's such an interesting monster, and I regard the way people talk about him in a similar way. The next episode will be centered around a very special Elder Dragon, so look out for that. Remember to like and subscribe, and have a good day.